All right, so we got a lot to get into today. The Pete Alonso drama is still heating up, whereas Andy Martino of SNY basically reported last week that a deal between the two sides is unlikely after they re-signed Jesse Winker on a one-year contract. And now, just a few days later, they add AJ Minter to their bullpen, who's been a career beast in the NL East with the Atlanta Braves. So we're going to talk Minter, we're going to talk Jesse Winker. But to start off the show, I feel like we've been starting off a lot of these podcasts recently with the Pete Alonso saga. So thank you guys for tuning in to the James Nolan podcast, and let's get right into it. So my colleague at FanSided, Robert Murray, recently reported that a Pete Alonso Mets reunion is definitely still on the table. And I quote, here's what he said. So Thursday, when reports surfaced that the slugger was increasingly unlikely to return to the New York Mets, that belief stemmed from a reported 3-year offer in the 68 to 70 million range is valid. But the reality is that Alonso returning to the Mets is still on the table. The two sides have talked recently, and it's clear that each side is best fit for each other. So if you're a Mets fan like myself, some exciting news that we like to hear from an insider like Robert Murray, who's a very trustworthy one. So yeah, I mean, I think what I've been thinking, that's what a lot of people have been thinking, is even though that they signed Jesse Winker and they signed AJ Minter, a Pete Alonso reunion is still on the table. And especially with these Starlin Marte rumors heating up, if they can shed a little bit off that payroll, they're probably going to have to pay pay him a little bit, whichever team they do trade him to, similar to how we paid Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. I don't think we're going to be paying a large chunk like we did with those two. But if we were able to move Marte, which I'm not a big fan of, I like the idea of using Starlin Marte as a right-handed DH to platoon with Jesse Winker. But if we do trade Marte, I think it increases the odds of a Pete Alonso reunion. And I've said it last week where, I understand the people against re-signing Pete Alonso. He's a guy who struck out less than 130 times just 2 seasons ago. In 2021 and 2022, he didn't strike out that much. Even 2023, only struck out just over 150 times. But this past season, in 2024, he struck out 173 times. And when you're a 4-hitter and a rally it's just coming together, and even looking at 2025, Pete Alonso in that 4-hole, the rally's coming together, and he's striking out at that rate, it's not too appealing. But at the same time, I'm also trying to, think of the positives of a Pete Alonso Mets reunion. One, he's not that old. He's just coming off an age 29 season. He's going to be 30 next season. So Pete Alonso isn't old. He's still in the prime years of an MLB player's career right now. So he's also a 40 home run hitter. I find it very hard to believe whether he's with the Mets or a new team next year, this season, actually, I should say, which is coming up right around the corner. It's January 21st. So pitchers and catchers report is right among us, guys. But Pete Alonso, if he's in that 4-hole with the Mets this year, or if he's in the 4-hole, 3-hole, wherever he's hidden in whatever lineup he's in, Pete Alonso is going to hit 40 home runs. His career low is 34. That's a career low for him. Career low, 88 RBIs. In 3 out of his 5 full seasons, not counting 2020, he's hit over 40 home runs. He's hit recorded over, I should say, 115 RBIs. So he is one of the best power hitting players in all of baseball, not just first baseman. He's one of the best power hitters in the game of baseball. And the Mets do have a clear need, not only for a first baseman, but for another impact bat to protect Juan Soto. And I don't think Juan Soto necessarily needs protection. He's a guy who's an MVP caliber player when he was with the Nationals, when they were dog water, even after they won the 2019 World Series. Like, after they won that World Series, they weren't very good, and Juan Soto was still putting up MVP-like numbers. And even when he was at the San Diego Padres and a lot of those guys were hurt, he was still putting up MVP-like numbers. So I don't think Juan Soto necessarily needs protection. But if you're looking at the moves that the Los Angeles Dodgers are making, they just signed Tanner Scott. They re-signed Teoscar Hernandez. They bring in Blake Snell. They bring in Michael Conforto. All these great moves the Dodgers are making. Us Mets fans, even Yankee fans, we're looking at our owners and our GMs and our president of baseball operations, and we're like, what's going on here? We know they have money. It's clear as day that they have money, but they clearly have a plan. The Yankees, it looks like they're that 1-year deal to Paul Goldschmidt, they're looking at the Japanese star first baseman in next free agency, or potentially a Vladdy Guerrero Jr. And the Mets, same thing. I'm not going to say they're necessarily looking at the Japanese slugger, but they're also looking at Vladdy Guerrero Jr. down the road, Kyle Tucker down the road, who are both going to be hitting free agency after the 2025 season. So it does make sense for the Yankees to sign a Paul Goldschmidt and for the Mets not to sign a Pete Alonso to a multi-year deal. And I'm talking multi-year deal is, yes, a 3-year deal. Because if they sign him for a 3-year deal, as much as Met fans want to believe, Pete Alonso could DH, Vladdy could play third, or or Mark Vientos can DH. No, Mark Vientos is not DH, and Pete Alonso doesn't want to DH. So we're going to have to bite the bullet if we do sign Pete Alonso, and that bullet will be not going in on the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. talks. As great of a player Vladdy is he really worth 500, 600 million? Because that's the type of money he's going to command. And do the Mets, David Stearns, Steve Cohen, do they want to have another player on the books with that much money? I get it. He's young. I get it. He hits over 300, over 30 home runs, over 100 RBIs. But if we can just re-sign Pete Alonso, we can look at other players that are going to command a lot less money. Kyle Tucker's one of those players. You know, I like the idea of this is what I would do if I'm the Mets. One, I would keep Starlin Marte. I know it's not my money, but I'd pay that luxury tax and go all in for 2025 because Francisco Lindor is not getting any younger. I talked about it on last week's pod. Francisco Lindor is not getting any younger. Sean Manaea is not getting any younger. Kodai Senga even too. He's on the north side of 30. He ain't getting any younger, and he has an opt-out after this year. So the Mets really need to go. Same thing with Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz has an opt-out after this year. The Mets have a window to win a championship in 2025, even with the Dodgers being stacked. I get it. The Dodgers have basically not even just an all-star team, but a World Baseball Classic team. That's how good they are. So I get it, but it's baseball. Anything can happen. The Dodgers had a phenomenal roster in 2021, 2022, and 2023. What happened? A lot of first-round exits. I'm not saying they're going to be a first-round exit this year, but anything can happen in baseball. And the Mets, I think they have a clear need for another impact bat, not necessarily Juan Soto protection, but a clear need for an impact bat and a clear need for a first baseman. Because I wrote an article just a few days ago. You can check it out on the FanSided author page. But I put up the 4 potential moves that they could make to find that third baseman internally. And obviously that involves Mark Vientos moving to first base like we all expect to happen if Pete Alonso's not on the Mets this season. But those options are Brett Beatty, who is less than a 220 career hitter. He's had time to prove himself. I guess he'll get one more shot if Alonso doesn't re-sign. The other option is Ronnie Mauricio, coming off a torn ACL, missed all of last season. And he had a on-base percentage less than 300 during his short stint with the Mets. And he's also a guy who strikes out a ton, even in the minor leagues. Look at his numbers. Ronnie Mauricio strikes out a lot. And then Wolfpack 29 says he wants Pete Alonso back. And I get it because these are the options. So we got Beatty, not a very good option. Ronnie Mauricio, not a very good option. They could always prove me wrong. My favorite option is Luis Angel Acuna, who I think is versatile. He can play multiple positions throughout the infield. He's athletic enough to pick up the third base glove. He's athletic enough to even play center field. He's just that good of an athlete. And the other option is Jet Williams, who's a wild card who dealt with a lot of injuries last year in AA and did struggle due to those injuries, but he's still an appealing prospect. The Mets clearly love him. He's the youngest player to reach AA. Well, not the youngest player, I should say. The fastest player that they drafted to reach AA since 1986. So I think the best option for the Mets in 2025 is, quite frankly, Pete Alonso. And this is what I would do. Obviously, it takes you out of the Vladdy talks, but you can be in on a Kyle Tucker talks. And Kyle Tucker is a great player. Now, this does crowd the outfield, but here's what I would do. I would make Brandon Nimmo the designated hitter of the New York Mets and sign Pete Alonso and sign Kyle Tucker in the next offseason. That is a loaded lineup. That is a Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Mark Vientos, probably Mark Vientos above Brandon Nimmo, maybe even Pete if he does progress. And we're going to get into Mark Vientos' numbers because, you know, one of my friends, Jake, he compared Mark Vientos' first year to Miguel Andujar. I'm butchering his last name, but he had 27 home runs in his rookie year with the Yankees, and now he's barely an MLB player. So I am high on Vientos, but there is also a scare where is that a one-time thing? We've seen it before. So Vientos, I still am high on, especially because of the postseason. Everybody's like, oh, well, pitchers adjust to you in your second season, and pitchers also adjust to you in the postseason. And he made an adjustment. And that's why I'm confident Mark Vientos having another great year in 2025. Maybe not as of a great year where he hits 27 home runs in 110 games, but if he plays the full 162 game year, 145, 150 plus games, I have a hard time seeing Vientos not hit 30 home runs, and that's based off his playoff performance. But Pete Alonso furthers the odds of Mark Vientos hitting 30-plus home runs. Pete Alonso furthers the odds of Juan Soto seeing a lot of just better pitches in general. Same thing with Francisco Lindor. Your top five, really, because I hate leaving Brandon Nimmo out of these conversations. Brandon Nimmo had a 800 career OPS. He's an 800 career OPS, 808. He had above an 800 OPS for 4 consecutive years heading into 2024. 788 OPS in 2024. Not too low. That's a pretty good OPS. And he hit over 20 home runs. So that's why I think he could also be a DH. It's because he's got pop in his bat. His on-base percentage is very high. And he has a lot of injury concerns. We're going to get into second base in a little bit. But second base, I think, is Jeff McNeil's to start the year, but he's going to be on a very short leash because with Luis Angel Acuna, who proved they kept him on the postseason roster for a reason because they trust that kid. He was lighting it up in the Venezuelan Winter League, over 300 batting average, multiple stolen bases, multiple home runs, OPS well over 900. So I do like the talent of Acuna, and he's got a very similar swing to his older brother, Ronald. I'm not saying he's going to put up Ronald Acuna numbers and win an MVP, but, he's pretty good. But I think McNeil with Acuna in the weightings for second base. But Alonso, they need him back. They need him back. Like I said before, out of his 5 full seasons, not counting 2020, the 60-game shortened year, he's hit over 40 home runs with over 115 RBIs in 3 of those 5 seasons. That is a bat you want in the lineup. And quite frankly, even if he hits below 40 home runs and it's somewhere between the 34 and 40 range, it's going to be hard to replace 34 home runs. And I know they did it with Juan Soto. That is a great win for the Knicks over the Brooklyn Nets. None of them played over 40 minutes too. But Pete Alonso, he's a great player. He is a great, great player. Now, yes, he had a down year. But if you look at Willy Adames and the contract he got, a 7-year deal with an OPS over 780. Pete Alonso also had an OPS over 780. Pete Alonso hit more home runs. Adames had more RBIs, but Alonso's hit over 115 RBIs in 3 out of his 5 full seasons, and they're relatively the same age. Now, I'm not saying you got to give Alonso a 7-year deal. He already turned that one down just a few seasons ago. 7 years, $158 million. And now he reportedly turned down a 3-year contract worth $68 to $70 million. But I think the Mets have the upper hand in this still. Because if Alonso had other suitors, I feel like he would have signed by now. We've seen first basemen and even the power hitters, besides Alex Bregman, fly off the board. Anthony Santander, as of recent, just signed a 5-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays with less AAV than Pete Alonso got offered. So now Pete Alonso might have to take less money to come back to the Mets. He might have to swallow that that pride pill. He just might have to. And he might have to come back to the Mets. Because also, Alonso, his best fit is the New York Mets. Like Robert Murray said, both sides kind of need each other. If Alonso goes to a team like the Angels or the Giants, if he went to the Blue Jays, which is off the table now, he wouldn't be Pete Alonso. He'd obviously still be Pete Alonso name, but he wouldn't be the brand that Pete Alonso is with the Mets. A career Met. We see David Wright just get his number retired. And David Wright really didn't do too much. David Wright had phenomenal, elite seasons, but he didn't win anything. He didn't win an MVP, didn't win a World Series, only made the playoffs twice in his entire career. Whereas Pete Alonso, he's made the postseason twice in his career. He has a chance to break the home run record, past David Wright, past Darryl Strawberry. He could get his jersey retired, even though he wouldn't be the best player on the Mets if they do win a World Series in the next 3-5 years. He'd still get his jersey retired. He'd still be remembered as one of the best Mets of all time. So Pete Alonso also needs the Mets just as much as the Mets need him. And with the recent signing that the Blue Jays just made with Santander, with Robert Murray saying that a reunion is still on the table, I think a reunion is still going to happen. Whereas last week, I thought maybe with Andy Martino's report, maybe it's true. The Mets aren't bluffing. The Mets are not afraid of a post-Pete Alonso world. But at the same time, they're still in on Pete Alonso. And it seems like Pete Alonso only has one suitor right now. Like I said before, if he had other suitors, he would have signed. And for a lot of those Met fans thinking that we should pay him more than $23 million a year, then why are the 29 other teams not offering him that? Why? Because it seems like Pete Alonso really only has one option here. And that one option is going back to the New York Mets. And that Mets lineup in 2025: Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo. I like the idea of actually hitting Nimmo third and Vientos fifth to kind of keep that lefty-righty. You know, you're going to have to go back-to-back righties no matter what, no matter who hits third or fifth. But I like the idea of hitting Nimmo third. Just with the on-base percentage, you know, you got three guys, Lindor, Soto, and Nimmo, who get on base a lot. And then you got Alonso and Vientos, who can drive in a lot of runs. So I like the idea of actually Nimmo batting third and Vientos batting fifth if we get Alonso. All right, let's get into some comments. What you think? What would I pay him? I'd pay him the offer that the Mets offered him. 3 years, somewhere in that 68 to 70 million range. I think that's more than fair. I think, you know, he would get paid higher than Matt Olson. You know, Bryce Harper makes $25 million a year. I believe 25.4 to be exact. Pete Alonso isn't Bryce Harper. I think we all know that. Pete Alonso is not getting a multi-year deal. As much as I love him, he's not that type of player. So, you know, it would be good for the Mets, like you said. It would be a good move for the Mets to get him for that cheap. And if he does have an opt-out after year 1 or year 2, if he goes off, then we can discuss, hey, maybe a 5-6 year deal worth over $100 million. But for now, I'd keep that offer on the table because I think Pete's going to come crawling back to the Mets saying, is that offer still on the table? Mike 1970 says, I think Stearns wanted no part in giving Soto the universe because he doesn't operate like that, but it was a Cohen decision. That is an owner move. That is 100% an owner move. But I think David Stearns is okay with that move. It makes David Stearns' job a lot easier now that he has a guy who gets on base 42% of the time for the next 15 years. 15 years. So, you know, I get it. You know, he doesn't operate like that, but I also kind of beg to differ because he's okay with offering these guys under 30 these mega contracts. I mean, we offered Yamamoto just a year ago a $325 million contract. So I think Stearns, his motto is don't pay guys and don't get them on multi-year deals if they're over 30. And I kind of like that. You know, I do like that. And even with Steve Cohen, I mean, everyone's kind of throwing a little shade at Steve Cohen for not stepping in here, but Steve Cohen's also not afraid to spend his money. He just gave Juan Soto $765 million. He gave Scherzer and Verlander over $40 million a year. And I get that didn't work out, but still, he did open up the checkbook. And I think if there's another player like a Kyle Tucker or a Vladdy, where if we have a need, where I think we do have a need, whether we sign Alonso or don't sign Alonso for one of those players. If we don't sign Alonso, I think Vladdy will get a big offer from the Mets. I'm not necessarily positive that will win that, with a lot of suitors probably going to be in on Vladdy, especially the New York Yankees. You know, they signed Paul Goldschmidt for that 1-year deal for a reason. They want that Japanese slugger first baseman. We're going to get at him a little bit with the Yankees, or a Vladimir Guerrero Jr., or even a Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker, who I think is not going to get over $500 million. Kyle Tucker, a guy who hits over 300, 280, 280, 300 range. Kyle Tucker, a guy who hits 30 home runs. You know, I'd like to have him in our lineup, and you shift Brandon Nimmo to DH. Bada bing, bada boom. So I think what the Mets should do, bring back Alonso, go all in for this year. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We still have Lindor in the prime years of his career, at least for, I'd say, another 3 to 4. We'd have Alonso in the prime years of his career. And then we also obviously have Juan Soto, who's not even in the prime years of his career MLB-wise. I mean, he's putting up MVP caliber seasons, but at the same time, he's already playing like an MVP at 26. So I like the idea of re-signing Alonso. Keep the Vladdy stuff out. You know, go for Kyle Tucker. He's going to be a lot cheaper than Vladdy. I'd say he's going to get somewhere between 300, maybe even 250 to 400 million. It's a wide range, but you never know these days with MLB contracts. But yeah, Carlos Adrian says, Mets are a joke. They say around and did nothing to improve this team. They lost out on all the top players. They needed bullpen help. And he lost out on Scott and Yates. And this is going to lead me into my next topic because we did get bullpen help. AJ Minter is not no scrub. AJ Minter has also, I believe Bryce Harper has struck out seven times against him in like 14 plate appearances or something like that. We'll get into his numbers exactly against Bryce Harper in a little bit. But AJ Minter is coming off a great 2024 season where he pitched to a 2.62 ERA. He's a guy who has a better career ERA than Tanner Scott, a 3.28 ERA. Appeared in 39 games last year. In 2023 and 2022, he appeared in over 70 games. So this is a good player. And in 2023, ERA of 3.76. His worst season was 2021, where he had a 3.78 ERA, but his best year, 2020, 0.83 ERA. 2.06 ERA in 2022. AJ Minter is not a scrub. And to say the Mets didn't get better, well, they added a great bullpen arm, a great back end of the bullpen in AJ Minter, and now they have Edwin Diaz, hopefully, who you think is going to improve. And then Juan Soto, even if the Mets don't get Pete Alonso, they still improved from last year. Because Juan Soto is a guy who struck out less than 130 times. Pete Alonso is a guy who struck out over 170 times. So I think we did improve no matter what happens with Pete Alonso. Don't get me wrong. With Pete Alonso, this team is better. This lineup is legit. But the lineup is also legit anyways. Lindor, Soto, and Vientos and Brandon Nimmo. Hopefully you get Francisco Alvarez to improve. That's a very good lineup. So I see what you mean. But I do think we got better. I do think we got at least, the very least, slightly better. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. They did nothing to get any starting pitching. This team is not good enough to compete. They need Vladdy. Forget Alonso. I think the Vladdy stuff is a pipe dream. If we don't get Alonso, I think Vladdy is on the table at the trade deadline, and that's if the Toronto Blue Jays are out of it, because I don't think they want to lose Vladdy for nothing. But it's not happening at least until the trade deadline. It's not. And let me ask you this scenario, Carlos. Mets re-signed Pete Alonso, and they're in on Kyle Tucker in the offseason. You move Brandon Nimmo to DH, and then your lineup is Lindor, Soto, Tucker, Alonso, Vientos, Nimmo. That's your top six. Would you want that? Or would you want Lindor, Soto, Vladdy, Vientos, Nimmo? You either have 5 really good players or 6 really good players with 3 MVP caliber players. Maybe 4, depending on what Mark Vientos does. And Pete Alonso hits over 40 home runs in 3 out of his 5 full seasons. And let's get into the bullpen a little bit more. AJ Minter, great signing, but this is what I love. Ryan Stanek, I think he'd be cheap. I don't think he'd command a lot of money, but the Mets still do need bullpen help. It's not like they don't. You take a look at the Mets bullpen right now. You got Reed Garrett. You got Tanner Scott, even though he's with the Dodgers. That sucks. I wish he signed with any other team. AJ Minter, Reed Garrett, and Edwin Diaz at the back end of your bullpen. Tyler McGill, I have a feeling he's going to be in this bullpen as well. Brazoban, he's going to be in the bullpen as well, and he was a great arm before the Mets got him. So if he can kind of find it, where we see David Stearns improve pitchers when they have a full offseason with the Mets, I think he might improve, and that could be another elite arm that we do have in that bullpen. Tyler McGill, he's a guy who we've noticed against the first time through the batting order. Tyler McGill pitches very well, and he throws hard. So I like the idea of McGill as a bullpen arm for the Mets. And then Jose Butto, he had a 2.60 ERA last year. He's a good pitcher. So this Mets bullpen, I think, got much better with just one signing in AJ Minter. But I still do like the idea of bringing back Ryan Stanek. Ryan Stanek was great for us, especially down the stretch of the season. When you look at his numbers overall, nothing too appealing. But he 7-3, 4.9 record. A 4.9 ERA. across last year, but he's a guy who was a 3.65 career ERA. He's going to be 33 next season. So I don't think he's going to be getting a 2-year deal, even like AJ Minter got. I think it's only going to take a 1-year deal. But yeah, that's what I think of the Mets bullpen right now. I think it's good, not great, but it's much better than it was last year. And if we can get a Stanek in the bullpen, I think we can play some games. The one guy who I did want outside of Minter was Kirby Yates, but then again, he's 37 years old, but still had a dominant year in 2024. The Dodgers are just loaded, man. Dodgers are loaded, but it's baseball. Anything can happen. And that's another thing why I wouldn't trade for Vladdy. You give up Brandon Sproat, and Brandon Sproat's another name who they have avoided trading for a reason. We're going to see Brandon Sproat at some point in the 2025 season, and he was great in the minor leagues. The Mets are very high on him, and if David Stearns is high on a pitcher, I'm high on a pitcher. I'll say that. Not necessarily Frankie Montas or Clay Holmes. Those are risks, but those are risks I'm willing to take. We're going to flip out of the bullpen for a little bit because Wolfpack asks, what about Jose Iglesias? If we don't get Alonso, I say you go for Jose Iglesias. I'd say even without Alonso, even with Alonso, you go for Jose Iglesias because he was just great off the bench. Someone goes down. If McNeil stinks and Acuna's not ready, let's say, Iglesias could be a good second baseman to plug in there. I don't think he's necessarily going to go hit over 300 like he did last year, but a guy off the bench that's a good player, and especially the clubhouse. I like that idea. I don't think it's a must, but I think it's a must if we don't get Pete Alonso, just so you have that insurance at third base. Let's say if Brett Beatty and Acuna don't work out and Mauricio isn't ready off his torn ACL. Iglesias at third, I'd be okay with that. I wouldn't love it, but I'd be definitely okay with it. But back to the bullpen, AJ Minter, he's great. I love AJ Minter. I love that signing. He's a guy who has a lot of experience in the NL East, pitched his entire 8-year career for the Atlanta Braves. And he's not just a lefty that dominates lefties, but we have some very good lefties in the NL East. But he can get right-handers out too. But AJ Minter, his career stats, let's take a peek at that right now. Versus probably the best player, I'd say. Maybe Juan Soto is not the best player in the NL East. Ronald Acuna, definitely one of the best players in the NL East. But AJ Minter versus Bryce Harper is very intriguing. Very intriguing. Let's take a look at Bryce Harper's stats versus AJ Minter. Bryce Harper is 2 for 14 in 17 plate appearances. So that's a 143 batting average, a 508 OPS. And he struck out how many times? Why is it not showing me the strikeouts? Oh, 6 times. 6 times in 17 plate appearances against AJ Minter. So now we got a guy who can get Bryce Harper out. Used to not have that guy since we had like a Jerry Blevins in 2015 and 2016, where he was just dominant against left-handers. Minter's dominant against left-handers, and he can still get right-handers out. So I love the AJ Minter signing. I still think we should make one more move. I like that move being Ryan Stanek. I love that name was brought up. Signing was worth it. Tanner Scott was going to be pricey since they still need bats. And that's another thing. Tanner Scott got a 4-year deal. He's getting paid over $20 million, I believe. That's a lot of money for a relief pitcher. But then again, I would like the idea of adding Tanner Scott, even if it was on a 4-year deal. The money is definitely high, but Edwin Diaz has an opt-out after this year. So we're going to need some type of Edwin Diaz insurance if he does opt out and has a year like he did in 2022. But then again, Edwin Diaz is also getting paid over $20 million a year. That's a risk if he does opt out. So, but if he does do great and he gets another multi-year deal, then he probably opts out. But if he's just middle of the pack, he ain't opting out. But Diaz is still a good pitcher in that pen. So Mike asked, do you think if Peterson struggles, he will go back and forth from starting pitching to the pen? David Peterson was lights out of the bullpen in the postseason, which is very intriguing. But at the same time, the Mets need starting pitching. So I think it's definitely a possibility. I think if he struggles in the rotation, yeah, you give him a shot in the pen just because of what he did in the playoffs. But at the same time, do we think he's going to struggle or do we think he's going to get better? I'm under the impression that David Peterson is going to get better because he got better in 1 year under Stearns and his pitching lab. So he was a guy who used a lot more of a sinker, kind of like what Sean Manaea did. A lot of these Mets pitchers, I should say, their sinker rate goes up when they pitch under Stearns. So, whatever Jeremy Hefner's doing with these guys, I think it's good. I'm not saying Frankie Montas is going to be Severino. I'm not saying Clay Holmes is going to be a Cy Young candidate. But what I'm saying is these guys aren't going to be terrible, you know? And same thing with David Peterson. I think he's not going to have a year like he did last year where he had a 2.9 ERA, but he's also going to pitch, and he only pitched, I believe, in 20 games last year since he got called up to join the rotation. So I think Peterson, if he gets like 30, 32 starts, probably like a 3.3 ERA, I'd say. And that's a good thing, even if it's like a 3.5. That's pretty good. If Clay Holmes blows up as a starter, and this is another thing, if Clay Holmes blows up as a starter, he drops to the backup, why am I butchering this? He'll drop to the pen as the backup. And imagine that. Clay Holmes struggles as a starter. You move him to the pen, and I love this. You get to see Sprout. And, then your bullpen is loaded. Clay Holmes, he had a 3.14 ERA last year, and that was bad for him. It was mainly because he was in that closing role with the Yankees. When you're a ground ball pitcher as a reliever, he had the highest ground ball rate in all of MLB last year, starters and relievers. You're just not, that's not good. You need strikeouts. You need to be a strikeout guy if you're coming out of the pen. That's why I like the idea of Tyler McGill, who strikes out a lot of guys first time through the order. That's why Jose Budo had success out of the bullpen. Whereas, Clay Holmes, not so much, but he was still a reliable reliever for the Yankees for years. And even when he got out of the closing role with the Yankees, he was still reliable for them. So if you have a bullpen of Holmes, Minter, Diaz, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Tyler McGill, and then your rotation, you replace Sprout with Clay Holmes. And if Brandon Sprout is anything that the Mets think of him, that's a pretty good pitching rotation and bullpen. So that's what we'll see there. But definitely exciting that AJ Minter signing. But I think the Mets still need a few more moves. The Pete Alonso pivot, it needs to work if they don't get Pete Alonso. That's a fact. Because if we don't get Pete Alonso and we stink, then we're all going to be calling. We're all going to be pissed at David Stearns. Especially if Pete Alonso has a great year with a new team. That would be bad for David Stearns. So yeah, the pivot plan, I like what I like the idea that I saw before from Wolfpack. Bring back Jose Iglesias just so you have some insurance at third base in case Brett Beatty doesn't work out, in case Ronnie Mauricio doesn't work out, in case Luis Acuna doesn't work out, and Jet Williams, also the wild card of that crew. So the Mets have 4 young guys who they can give that opportunity to at third base. So I also like the idea, call me crazy, but I like this idea. Jesse Winker gets on base a lot. Now, I'm not saying I like the idea of Jesse Winker playing every day, but I like the idea of Jesse Winker playing every day versus like a Brett Beatty. What I would do is if I don't get Alonso, I get Jesse Winker at first baseman and say, let's try to get you to become a first baseman. Jesse Winker becomes a first baseman. Mark Vientos can stay at third. And Jesse Winker, I want to talk about that a little bit more because Jesse Winker was great in the postseason for the Mets, obviously. But last year, overall, 253 batting average, 14 home runs. Anthony DeComo wrote a really good piece on Jesse Winker and that signing today. You can go check it out on his page, I believe on MLB.com. But this is a guy from 2019 to 2021, 3 consecutive seasons where he had an OPS over 830. Really, from 2017 through 2021. 2017, 904 OPS. 2018, 836 OPS. 2019, 830 OPS. 2020, 932. 2021, 949 OPS. And he gets on base. We know David Stearns loves guys who get on base. 367 on base percentage over his 8-year career. Before he got traded to the Mets, he had a 793 OPS, a 374 on base percentage, and he had 11 home runs in 101 games. And this is a guy in 2021 who was a very good ball player, had a 305 batting average, hit 24 home runs, drove in 71 runs, an on-base percentage of 394. So if we get a shade of that Jesse Winker, sign me up for it. But this is a guy who's going to be a part-time player. And that as a part-time player, and when we saw it work in the postseason, and versus righties, he has pretty good splits. Last year, he only had a 788 split against right-handers, but his career split against right-handers, he has an OPS well over 800. And he gets on base. And that's huge. So, and speaking of Winker, we got to talk about the potential platoon at DH with Starlin Marte. I like the idea of keeping Starlin Marte because Starlin Marte is a guy who hit 310 off left-handers last year with an OPS well over 800 as well. And Starlin Marte, I don't want him obviously playing every day because he gets hurt a lot now. But down the stretch, he was clutch. In the playoffs, he was clutch. We saw it. When guys are on base in a big spot, he still has that ability to slap the ball the other way into right field and get a base knock and drive it running. So I like the idea of Starlin Marte as a platoon DH. And if you told me that we would not, if you told me platoon DH in 2025 with Juan Soto, like a few years ago, when we had Daniel Vogelback and Darren Ruff as our platoon DH, I'd say get the hell out of here. I don't want to do a platoon DH ever again. But JD Martinez is not walking through that door. And he wasn't even that great of a DH down the stretch for the Mets. I love the Winker and Marte platoon. I love it. I'm all for it. I am all for it. But yeah, I mean, the Mets pivot plan, I think what you do, if you don't get Pete, obviously you bank on Winker and Marte to be a good DH. You bank on Soto to have another MVP caliber season. Same thing with Francisco Lindor. Mark Vientos. I mean, that's a guy who only played in 110 games last year. And Pete Alonso also struck out over 170 times. And if you got a guy who's striking out that much in the 4-hole, it's not going to be too good for you. So, whereas Brandon Nimmo, who has an OPS well over 800 throughout his career, an on-base percentage well over 360, I like that. And then Francisco Alvarez, he's a wild card in this Mets lineup going into this year. Because if Alvarez hits over 25 home runs, hit 25 home runs just 2 years ago in his rookie year, if he increases his batting average from, I believe it's like a 220 batting average career rise, if he brings that up to even like a 240, that's a big plus in the Mets lineup. So Francisco Alvarez is definitely the wild card in this lineup. Whereas last year, heading into the year, is Brett Beatty. But this year, it's Francisco Alvarez. And we all know Francisco Alvarez is more than capable of being a great hitter at the MLB level. He was the number one prospect in all of baseball just a few years ago for a reason. So Francisco Alvarez, I think you're going to bank on a lot heading into this year. All right. We're going to take a quick break on the Mets. We're going to get into some Yankees news, unless there's anything let's talk about second base before I end the Mets discussion. Second base, Jeff McNeil, you got to give him the opening day nod. You got to at least let him get a shot. Former batting champion, career 289 hitter. And in the last 55 games of 2024, before he went down, let's take a look at the exact numbers because he had the best stretch of his career, in my opinion. 272 batting average in the last 55 games of his career, 27 RBIs, 25 runs scored, 7 home runs. He played very well after the All-Star break. Had the second highest OPS on the team after the All-Star break, only after Francisco Lindor. So McNeil, he has to get that shot. And if McNeil is anything like he was in the second half, that's also another plus in the Mets lineup. And if he's not, then you give a guy like Luis Angel Acuna a shot. Luis Angel Acuna, I mean, what's not to love about him? He's just a good ball player. Last year in his short stint, 966 OPS with a 330 batting average. But let's take a look at his Venezuelan Winter League stats. 31 games in that league. This is just over the winter. 337 batting average, a 914 OPS, 419 on base percentage. Acuna is a very good ball player. Very good ball player. In the minors, through 5 seasons, 351 on base percentage. He stole 40 bases in AAA in just 130 games in 2024. This guy, 57 stolen bases in 2023 in AA and AAA. I like the idea of Acuna joining this lineup at some point. I'd rather give him that third base opportunity if we don't re-sign Alonso than Brett Beatty. But I love Acuna. I can't be wrong. I love Acuna. This guy has hit at every single level. He's been stealing bases at every single level. He gets on base at every single level. And I know it was a short stint in the second half of last year when Lindor went down. But Acuna, over a 162 game season, I mean, at least stolen base wise, you're going to get lights out defense wherever he plays, whether it's third, maybe even short with Lindor. If he goes down, needs a few breaks here and there, DH. Second base, if McNeil stinks, Acuna over a full season. I'm not saying he's going to hit over 20 home runs. I don't think, a guy his size, maybe he could. He does have very good bat speed. He gets his bat through the zone very quickly. But Acuna, I mean, if he can be a 40-plus stolen base guy on the Mets, we need speed. Like, we need speed badly. And Acuna, probably the fastest, most athletic player in the entire Mets organization. Jet Williams, definitely up there with him. But I think Acuna is definitely more athletic and more durable. He doesn't really get hurt, where we saw Jet Williams get hurt last year. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Who is the backup catcher? Oh, the backup catcher for the Mets. This is a tough one. I want to see Kevin Parada finally get a shot. I'm not going to lie. And, I get it. He's young. You want more plate appearances at a minor league level. But if Alvarez doesn't work out, you got to give Parada a shot. I don't think Alvarez, we're going to get an Anthony Volpe a little bit. Short leash for both of those guys. If Alvarez lights it up to start this year and he does great, then that's great. But if he's not doing too well, if he's playing like he did last year and even the year before, he did hit 25 home runs, but an on-base percentage of 293 in his rookie year, I think you got to pull the plug. And give Kevin Parada a shot. So, and now if Alvarez performs and you don't sign Pete Alonso and we're in it at the deadline, and let's say the Blue Jays aren't, or the Chicago Cubs aren't, maybe explore the idea of saying, hey, we got a nice young catcher in Kevin Parada. We got a guy like Ronnie Mauricio, who we really can't find a spot for, who's a pretty good ball player. What if we include those two in a package for a guy like Vladdy, for a guy like Kyle Tucker? So, and that's also why I don't want to trade for Vladdy right now, because I feel like a trade for a starting pitcher would be completely off the table. A guy like Dylan Cease, who the Padres are reportedly looking to move, Louis Castillo, still's got 3 years of control left on his contract. So, those are guys that you potentially want. And if you trade for Vladdy, then you can kiss those trades goodbye for a starting pitcher. So that's why I want Pete Alonso. Trade a few prospects that you're never going to use to a team like the Padres, a team like the Mariners, get a Castillo, get a Dylan Cease, one of those guys. And then come next offseason, you bring in Kyle Tucker and you move Brandon Nimmo to DH. That would be my move on the Mets. Dodgers, screw them. They're not ruining baseball, but, it is kind of annoying. Let's talk about the Dodgers for a quick second, and then we'll hop into some Yankees talk. They're reportedly linked to Ha-Seong Kim. They do need a second baseman desperately. We're going to talk about the Martian, Jason Dominguez, but, the Mets, just to end it on this note, we did get better, but I do want Pete Alonso back because we'd be even better with Pete Alonso. We're also going to be talking about the Knicks soon with a big win, 99-95 over the Brooklyn Nets. Cat, 24 points. Brunson only 17, kind of shocking, but, Brunson's Brunson. He's still good. But the LA Dodgers, they're annoying, man. They are annoying. I mean, you look at they have the best starting rotation, they have the best bullpen, and they have the best lineup. But here's the thing about the Dodgers. Their starting rotation, not very durable. Ohtani coming off Tommy John. Yamamoto got hurt last year. Blake Snell, only 20 games last year, always has a reoccurring shoulder injury. Gavin Stone, he's coming off a Tommy John surgery. He's probably not even going to play in 2025. Tyler Glasnow, he was hurt, missed the entire second half of last year. Like, Dodgers are putting a lot of eggs in the starting pitching basket, but their starting pitching basket isn't very durable. And if their starting pitching goes down, you can have a great bullpen. You can have a great lineup. I mean, they did do it last year. Don't get me wrong. But they also had Yamamoto. They also had Jack Flaherty pitching well. Walker Buehler pitched well in the playoffs. They're not going to have Walker Buehler. They're not going to have Jack Flaherty. If Yamamoto or Ohtani or Glasnow, two of those guys go down. Blake Snell, two of those guys go down. Dodgers are not going to be that good. So I do expect the Dodgers to re-sign Clayton Kershaw. Oh, that just reminded me. One more move I want to talk about before I end on this Mets topic. We're on 45 minutes on the Mets. We got to get into some other teams. But the Mets, one move I would make if I were them, if you can't trade for a pitcher, is a Max Scherzer reunion. What do you guys think of that? He pitched very well during his 2 years with the Mets. I believe it was like a 3.22 ERA. Pitched very well in 2022. The ace of the staff in 2022. I'd make a call. I know it didn't end well. I know he had a lot of bad things to say, but that was also about Billy Epler. Now we got David Stearns. He loves Steve Cohen. Make a call to Max Scherzer. Because even if he gives you 20, 25 starts, he's going to pitch well. And I like the idea of having a six-man rotation, having some insurance on Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes, even David Peterson. Because Kodai Senga, Chamonix, I think they're going to be good. They're going to be great. Chamonix is a guy who's pitched in 30-plus starts, 4 consecutive years. I expect him, knock on wood, to make every single, if not miss one start. But, Max Scherzer. Why not? Let's see. Make a call. See what they do. All right, we're going to get into the Yankees. Going to take a quick break. Talk some. Actually, no break. Let's just get right into it. Ha-Seong Kim rumors are heating up. The Yankees have been linked to him really almost, not all offseason, but the last, I'd say, month and a half. Reports are suggesting he's not going to be ready for opening day. But even though he's not going to be ready for opening day, he'll be ready within the first month is what they're saying. But, they need a second baseman. He didn't have a great year last year. Only hit 233, but he was also hurt. But, he's a guy who hit 260 in 2023, 251 in 2022, OPS is 749, OPS is 708. You need a Gleyber Torres replacement. You cannot trust DJ LeMahieu, who had a negative WAR last year, got hurt 4 different times last year, hasn't hit. Let's take a look at DJ LeMahieu's exact numbers over the past few years of his career, because he's a guy who's 36 years old, going to be turning 37 next year, hit 204 just last year in 67 games. In 2023, he hit 243. He's not, if you're not hitting for power, hitting 240 is not good. It's just not. The last time he hit above 300 was 2020, and that was the shortened season. So since 2018, he's only hit above 300 twice. Now he's 36. So 1.3 WAR in 2023. And Kim is a better defender. He had a 2.6 WAR in 2024. In 2023, a 5.8 WAR. So when he's healthy, he's a great defender. He obviously doesn't hit the home run ball a lot like Gleyber Torres did, but he gets on base. 351 on base percentage in 2023. 330 on base percentage this past season. Outside of his rookie year, he gets on base. So I think the Yankees should bring in Ha-Seong Kim. You got an infield of Goldie, Kim, Volpe, and then you keep Jazz at third. Jazz is probably the best offensive player in that infield, especially at this point in Paul Goldschmidt's career. Paul Goldschmidt, he was great, former MVP just 2 years ago. Now 3 years ago, wow. But, he's a guy who's been steadily declining. That 317 batting average in 2022 drops down to a 268 in 2023 and down to a 245 in 2024. So if he continues this pace, he's not going to be hitting very well. 981 OPS in 2022, 810 OPS in 2023, 716 OPS in 2024. And this is a guy who's 37 years old. That's some significant drop-offs. 35 home runs in 22, 25 in 23, and then this past season, 22. 115 RBIs in 22, 23 only 80, and then 24 only 65. Goldie has dropped off a ton. 7.7 WAR in 22, 3.4 WAR in 2023, and this past year, 1.3. I know he's a former MVP, but I don't think he's going to be as advertised. So just be careful with the Goldie. You know, you're coming off an Anthony Rizzo. It's like he didn't play well at all in 2024, even 2023. Goldie, I don't expect to be any better than he was last year. Eddie, what's up, dude? Kim would be good on the Yankees. He's an underrated player. He is. He is an underrated player. The Yankees have a clear hole at second base. DJ LeMahieu, I'm not too confident in. The other option would be Oswaldo Cabrera. And Oswaldo Cabrera, he's got multiple opportunities. Hit 247 in 2024 with only 8 home runs. He's just not what he was advertised to be when he first came up in the league. So only a 233 career batting average through his 3 seasons with the Yanks. Played over 100 games the last 2 years. On base percentage, not too high as well. A 291 on base percentage. He just wouldn't be a good option. Oswaldo Cabrera, DJ LeMahieu should not get the starting nod for the Yankees. And the Yankees, just like the Mets, a little bit less than the Mets, their championship window is closing. Aaron Judge is turning 34 next year. I believe he is. Let's just fact check myself there. Yeah, he's turning 33 next year, actually. 1 year off. As great as he is, probably has what? 2, 3 at most, 50-plus home run, 300-plus batting average, 120-plus RBI seasons left. Garrett Cole, he's aging. Garrett Cole, I believe he's 35, I want to say. 34 years old. Oh, so he'll turn 35 next September. Still old. Got hurt last year. Max Fried only pitched in 30-plus games twice in his 9-year career. So he had some forearm issues, which is never good for a pitcher, obviously, last year and the year before. Never a good sign. Louis Hill, I get he won the AL Rookie of the Year, and he can always get better, and I do expect him to get better. But when he's out of the zone and he doesn't get a first pitch strike, Louis Hill's, he's not too good. So, yeah, the Yankees are just in an interesting spot. I love the Devin Williams move, but, they need a second baseman. And I think what I would do if I were the Yankees, it seems like their plan with the Goldie 1-year deal is they're holding out. They're holding out for the offseason in 2026. Well, after the 2025 season. I should say 25 to 26 offseason. The Yankees are holding out for next offseason. That's why they did just offer Juan Soto $760 million. So they're going to be prepared to spend a lot of money next offseason. You get a lot of good options. Kyle Tucker and Vladdy and the Japanese slugger coming over. So, Kim, I think, is a good Band-Aid at second base. I'm shocked that the Yankees aren't in on Alex Bregman. I mean, if you have an infield of Goldie, even if he's hitting 240-ish, maybe he can hit a little bit more home runs, more than 22. That's good in a lineup with Aaron Judge, short porch in right field. I know he's a righty, but you never know. Cody Bellinger out in center. I don't think he's a Cody Bellinger when he won the MVP in 2019, but he's still a good player, especially if he played like he did in 2023. Aaron Judge is obviously Aaron Judge, Jason Dominguez, DeMartian. I mean, if he's as advertised, if he hits 20-plus home runs, I mean, I believe he hits a home run every 16 at-bats. So, over a 162-game season, that's a lot of home runs for a young kid like him. And I do think he'll play well. I mean, maybe not defensively because he had some struggles defensively, but offensively, I think he's going to provide the Yankees a lot. But they still have really an offensive hole at shortstop because Volpe's not a great offensive player. DJ LeMahieu, Oswaldo Cabrera, they're not doing anything for you on the offensive end. Goldie's at the tail end of his career. I mean, Jazz is really your best offensive infielder. That's a problem for the Yankees. If they want to return to the ALCS, if they want to return to the World Series, potentially win one, they have a great rotation. They have a great bullpen. Then they got to make another move. They got to make another move this year. But what I think the Yankees are doing is kind of smart, signing Goldie on that 1-year deal. They have been heavily linked to the first baseman from Japan. I'm going to bring up his numbers right now. Let's bring him up. Oh, speaking of the Yankees, shout out to CC Sabathia getting in the Hall of Fame. Mets miss Carlos Beltran. Sucks, but he'll probably get in next year wearing that Mets cap. Kind of a weak class next year. Billy Wagner in the Hall of Fame as well. Munteka Makamari. Did I say that right? Munteka Makamari. His name is hard to say. I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to get used to it. I'm going to nail it down. But he's a great ball player, dude. He's a great ball player. Kind of took a dip in the 2024 season. Hit 244, 851 OPS. Even in 2023, only an 875 OPS with a 256 batting average. But 2022, these numbers, 1.168 OPS, 318 batting average, 56 home runs, 134 RBIs. If the Yankees get that guy, I'd say he probably is a 30-plus, 40-plus home run hitter. You got to also factor in he's a lefty. So that short porch would do him well. But then again, the Dodgers have just been getting everybody, especially from Japan. But then again, they also have Freddie Freeman. So that's where the Yankees kind of have that plus there for Murakami. I hope I'm saying his name right. But yeah, over his career MPB stats, 272 batting average, 395 on base percentage, 543 slugging percentage. He strikes out a lot. Don't get me wrong. Only 640 walks to 997 strikeouts, but 241 home runs before he turned 25 in Japan. So, and then again, he's only 24 years old. 24 years old. But they also got other options. Vladdy is going to be a free agent. Kyle Tucker, who they were linked to all offseason before he got traded to the Cubs. Yankees are saving up for next offseason. No doubt about it. But, Yankees, they got some question marks for sure. Let's talk about Marcus Stroman. They've been linked to be trading him, at least trying to trade him. And I think they should if they can. He had a terrible season last year, a 4.31 ERA, one of his worst seasons, if not his worst season. He's a 3.72 career ERA guy. He was horrible. In 2024, he signed that 2-year deal worth $37 million. But it's an $18 million contract this year. So it is going to be hard to trade him considering the year he's coming off to. But then again, there's got to be a team out there that's saying, hey, maybe we can fix Marcus Stroman. And no, it's not going to be the Mets. I've seen some Mets fans say they want him. But, if they can include him in a package for Luis Arias, pick up a lot of his salary. I talked about it on a few pods ago. Arias is not a guy who's a great fit for a lot of teams. But on the Yankees, he's a very good fit. If you have Luis Arias, who's hit 354 just a few seasons ago, 3 consecutive batting titles. You have him hitting at the top of your order in front of Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge is going to be driving that guy in. So, and then you wouldn't even have to sign Ha-Seong Kim. Eddie, no Marcus Stroman. No Marcus Stroman to the Mets. If they eat money, I wouldn't even do it. I don't want Marcus Stroman on the Mets at all. He was not a good clubhouse guy when he was with the Mets. He hated the Mets fans. And Marcus Stroman's stats in his last 15 games of last year were terrible. He got dropped out of the rotation. That's how bad he was. He had in his last 15 games, 4-6 record, an ERA of 5.79. I get it. He was good here, but he just said he was good here. He was good here, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Based off his last 15 games, I don't find it too intriguing, but he was good with the Mets. He was good with the Mets. In 2021 with the Mets, in 33 games, he pitched to a 3.02 ERA. Don't get me wrong, that's good. But at his age right now, turning 34 next season, turning 34 in May, I don't know. I don't think we need Marcus Stroman. I'd rather go after a guy like Max Scherzer. If we're going to have a reunion with any Mets pitcher, why not Max Scherzer? Screw it. Bring back Max Scherzer. See what he can do. But I think the Mets need to trade for a pitcher like Dylan Cease. Louis Castillo, I would love. I get his strikeouts have been dipping. But we've seen guys, when their strikeouts dip, they're just as good. They're just as good. So I like the idea of Castillo on the Mets. But Stroman's going to be tough to trade based off those last 15 starts, that an ERA over 5.7, a 5-6 record. He did not pitch well at all. 5.79 ERA. That is terrible. Terrible. But in the bullpen for a team, he pitched 3 innings against the Seattle Mariners. Oh, that was a start. Actually, he came out of the pen, only let up 1 run. So, out of the pen for a team, maybe, but I don't think a lot of teams want Marcus Stroman based off what he did those last 15 games of the season. But maybe the Padres, because the Padres need a back-end starter. That's the really only realistic team I could see him going to. But it's going to be tough. And I like the idea of Luis Ariz on the Yankees, because like I said before, if you have a guy with a lifetime batting average well over 320 hitting in front of Aaron Judge, he's going to score a lot of runs. I get it, he's a one-tool player, but Yankees could use a player like that. It really could. Even like DJ LeMahieu, I think it was like 2019 where last time he hit over 300. 2020, Yankees were very good in 2021 and 2020. So we'll see what they do. They definitely need another second baseman. But yeah, the Yankees need to do something. I want to see the Mets get Pete Alonso. Eddie. I'm not going to lie, because I like the idea of getting Pete Alonso, sign Kyle Tucker in the offseason, shift Brandon Nimmo to DH. But we're talking 2025. I want Pete Alonso, bullpen help. I'd say Ryan Stanek, bring him back. He's a guy with a sub-4 ERA, and there's not really that many great bullpen arms left in free agency. Let me take a look. But a lot of them went off the board. Like Jeff Hoffman was somebody who I really wanted the Mets to sign. Tanner Scott was obviously a Mets player that was now a Dodgers player that I wanted to see sign. But I think Stanek is now the best option for the Mets. Like you said, yeah, Ryan Stanek. He was great down the stretch for us. You got Yates did sign. Kirby Yates signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, which sucks. They have the best bullpen, best rotation, and best lineup. But then again, like I said before, that starting rotation, a lot of those guys aren't too durable. So that's where I could see the Dodgers struggling. But, you take a look. And then Clay Holmes is also another wild card to join the bullpen at some point for the Mets. But AJ Minter, I love that signing. But, there's really not too many great players yet. The Kirby Yates deal actually hasn't been made official, but he tentatively accepted. Paul Sewald still on the board. Paul Sewald, I guess, I wouldn't mind. Paul Sewald, when he was with the Mets, he had some good years. And when he went to Seattle in 2021, a 3.06 ERA in 62 games, 2.67 ERA in Seattle in 2022. Across the 2023 season with 2 different teams with Seattle and Arizona. He had a 3.12 ERA. Coming off a bad year, pitched to a 4.31 ERA. But he's he's a good idea. And David Robertson, I love that you brought that name up. I wasn't even thinking of David Robertson. He is up there in age. Going to be 40 years old on April 9th this upcoming season. But he had a 3 ERA in 68 games with the Rangers this past year. In 2023, when he got traded to Miami, he sucked. But in 2023 with the New York Mets, and we all know the story, 2.66 ERA in 40 games in 20 overall 62 games in 2023 too. So he's a guy who's durable even at his age. I like the idea of bringing in David Robertson because that's, it would be cheap, probably a 1-year deal, 2 years at most. So I would love a David Robertson reunion. And he's a guy, even though we traded him, it didn't end on a bad note. Whereas Max Scherzer, he was talking crap about the Mets left and right, really about Billy Epler, not even the Mets. Kind of had some good things to say about Cohen. But 1 year, $7 million, sign me up for David Robertson. Sign me up for David Robertson. I'm not sure if the Mets have been heavily linked to them, but they definitely need another arm in that bullpen, I'd say, before it's really good. It has a makeup to be really good. Reed Garrett, with his strikeout rate, if he comes back and he performs well, I like the idea of Reed Garrett getting a lot of appearances with the Mets. AJ Minter, obviously, I love that signing. Edwin Diaz, if he can even be a shade of what he was in 2022, down the stretch, even in the playoffs, Edwin Diaz is actually pretty good. So, if he can be a shade of what he was in 2022, that's a huge plus for the Mets. And then I like Jose Butto. I like the idea of moving Tyler McGill. I mean, he's a guy first time through the order. He pitches very well. So there's some moves that the Mets can still make. There's definitely some moves that the Mets can still make. All right. Let's see what else we got. Oh, Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe, kind of like Francisco Alvarez, he needs to come out of the gates hot because career batting average 228. On-base percentage, 288 career on-base percentage. 2 consecutive years with an on-base percentage below 300. And you can be great at defense all you want. But, I mean, if you're putting up those numbers offensively and you're trying to win a championship, I don't care how great you are at defense. It's just not plausible for the Yankees to have basically a hole at shortstop with Anthony Volpe. So that's what I'll say on Anthony Volpe. Why did the Mets not sign Santander since he was cheaper than Alonso but hit more home runs than him? 5 years. 5-year deal. If anything we learned from David Stearns, he's not giving out more than a 3-year deal to a guy over 30 years old. Not at all. Not at all. But I think Santander kind of helps the case of the Mets. And this also keeps me in on, I think the Mets are still in on Alonso. So that's what I'll say there. But Yankees, we kind of talked about it. Are they better than they were last year? Are they AL favorites? I think, yeah, but that's only because the American League isn't too crowded. But that's what I'll say there. All right. Let's flip to baseball, to football real quick. We're going to fly through football stuff. Jets hiring Aaron Glenn potentially, but he did leave their building today. He's got an interview with the New Orleans Saints. I love Aaron Glenn. I don't think he's a Robert Saleh 2.0, where he's a fiery defensive coordinator coming to the Jets, coming to be their head coach, and then it craps out. I like the idea of Aaron Glenn. I do like the idea of Aaron Glenn. I'd say Aaron Glenn or Josh McCown at this point are my top two. Brian Flores, I'm kind of out on, just based off what he had in Miami. If something changed with him, but obviously we saw Miami right when they got rid of him. They bring in Mike McDaniel. Boom, flip the script, and they were a game out of the playoffs. They beat the Jets. They're in the playoffs, so. Probably wouldn't have done too much damage in the playoffs, but I would hire Aaron Glenn, and if I hire Aaron Glenn, I'm bringing back Aaron Rodgers and I'm bringing back Devontae Adams. That's what I'm doing if I'm the Jets. Because Aaron Glenn, I think it would, even if it was a Josh McCown or really any first-time head coach, if you have a 4-time MVP as your starting quarterback, you got some breathing room, especially at his age. Because if he stinks, then you know what, he stinks. And it's not the head coach's fault. Whereas if they do well, the head coach gets a lot of credit for it. they're going to get a ton of credit for it. Whereas if they bring in a rookie quarterback and they stink and he doesn't develop in the first 2 years, like we saw with Zach Wilson and Robert Saleh, their chances of sticking around with the Jets, not too good. Not too good. All right, we're going to hit the Giants, and then we're going to end this because I'm getting 11:38. Not too late. We can go for a little bit more. Giants have a few QB options. I like the idea. I don't think they're going to get Shedeur Sanders. I don't think they're going to get Cam Ward. I don't think those two players are going to fall to them at number 3 overall. So they're probably going to have to take a quarterback and late in the first round if they trade up, probably in the second round. But the veteran QB options are what I think the Giants seriously need to take a look at. Kirk Cousins is going to be signing on a veteran minimum likely. They could, if they cut him, they save $10 million. Whereas if they trade him to try to get something back for him, they're going to be paying an extra $10 million. But, his future in Atlanta is over. It's over. Michael Penix Jr. is getting that opportunity. He played very well. But I like the idea of Kirk Cousins. I think he'd do well, especially with a guy like Malik Neighbors. Another guy who I mentioned, I believe I mentioned these last week on the pod as well, but another guy I like is Justin Fields with the Giants, still young, only 25. He was 6-2, had 10 total touchdowns, 5 rushing, 5 passing, only 1 interception with the Steelers in his 6 starts to start the year. I like the idea of Justin Fields giving him a shot. He's not going to be commanding a ton of money, that's for sure. He just hasn't proved enough. Sam Darnold, I mentioned him last week, but I think he's going to get a multi-year deal, and the Giants can't be handing out multi-year deals. If it's a 1-year deal, maybe you take a look at him, but he's going to get a multi-year contract. I get he sucked in the week 18 and in the first round of the playoffs, first round exit. That was tough, but he still went 14-3. Still had over 4,500 passing yards, had 35 passing touchdowns. He's going to command a lot of money. But if we take a look at the free agent options in free agency this year in the NFL, I mean, there's pretty good quarterbacks. Drew Lock probably not coming back, I would say. But you got, Trey Lance, maybe a project there. Jacoby Brissett, Andy Dalton, got Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, probably won't cost too much. Mac Jones, he'll be a free agent. He's not going to command a ton of money. He'll probably have to take a 1-2 year deal at best. There's some good quarterbacks out there. Teddy Bridgewater, Russell Wilson. There's some good veteran quarterbacks on the open market that the Giants could bring in. And even if they draft a quarterback, you're going to have to bring in a veteran quarterback no matter what. Right now their QB room is Tommy DeVito. So we'll see with that. But I like the idea of drafting Travis Hunter. But yeah, that's it football-wise. I'm going to talk big draft show next week. We're going to talk Jets draft targets, Giants draft targets, and then hopefully I can get a breaking news pod at some point up this week. Pete Alonso coming to the Mets. And if Pete Alonso doesn't sign, got to go get Jose Iglesias. I love the idea of Vladdy, but I don't think that would happen until the trade deadline. They just signed Santander. They're trying to get an extension done before spring training. If they don't get an extension done and they're out of it at the deadline, send the prospects to Toronto and bring in Vladdy. But that's it for today's show. Thank you guys for all joining. Eddie, Knicks, baby. Knicks are still doing it, scratching a win over the Brooklyn Nets tonight. But you know what? I'll take it. I'll take what I can get. And I know Eddie, he hates the Tibbs haters. Not hates them, but, he's a Tibbs defender. He plays his guys a lot of minutes, but you know what? This team is still third in the Eastern Conference right now. Third in the Eastern Conference. But the Cavs are very good. The Celtics are very good. Make sure you go check out Eddie's Knicks content. Even his Mets content is going to be heating up now that the season's coming around. So make sure you go check out Eddie. Thank you guys all for commenting. Thank you. We got over 240 watching right now. Thank you guys. Facebook, X, YouTube, wherever you're watching. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. We're out of here. Deuces.